Hi, you're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 554, and today's date is December 30th, 2014, and the title of this episode is U.S. Government Telling Lies to Push the War Agenda. Now, before I get started, I just want to make an announcement. Tomorrow, December 31st, there will be a news brief. January 1st, New Year's Day, there will be no report. Friday, January 2nd, and Saturday, January 3rd, both of these days will be news briefs. And then on Monday, we will start with the full reports once again. Let's get into the economic collapse news. Now, we understand here in the United States, the economy isn't doing as well as the U.S. government central bankers would like it. And we can see that they've been pushing the gas prices down, trying to spur retail sales of this holiday season. It's not going as planned. There's a lot of store closures coming up. I don't believe JCPenney, Radio Shack, Sears, many of these stores will not make it. Yes, they might last going into 2015, but as we go throughout the year and sales completely drop off, I don't believe they're going to make it. But consumer confidence right now has missed the second month in a row, and we can see right now the previous dip was revised higher because revisions is exactly what makes sense in a confidence survey from 88.7 to 91, but the current level printed at 92.6 against expectations of 93.9. This is the third miss of the last 4 months. Right now, plans to buy a car also slipped, with home purchase plans the lowest in at least 6 months. And again, prices now are starting to come down. Shiller's 20-city home price index dropped 0.1% month on month in October, the second monthly drop in a row. It is the 11th month in a row of growth deceleration. Housing was somber. Housing starts pull back 1.6%. Existing home sales were at 4.93 million, down 6.1%, and new home sales were 438,000, down 1.6%, all in November. What does this tell us? Well, it shows that the real estate market is not doing well. Just like I said, going all the way back to August of 2013, when mortgage departments were laying off thousands upon thousands of people, I said, people are just tapped out. They do not have the funds to pay for these houses. They don't have the income. They don't have the jobs. And they knew this. They realized this. And this is why they were laying off these people, because they realized the American people were not going to take out mortgages. What has happened is that the Fed has been giving free money to investment companies, hedge funds, foreign investors have come in and paid cash for these homes. The banks were told to keep these houses off the market to make it look like there was a lot less supply, but a lot of demand for these homes, and it drove the prices up. And now we see these hedge funds, these investment companies, they are trying to get out of the market. Robert Shiller, he's even out there saying that, listen, real estate market is not a good investment at this time. Prices are coming down. I went around the country. I looked at Zillow. I looked at Realtor.com, and you can see houses have been on the market still 90, 120 days, 160 days, and they're continually lowering prices. It has begun. Now, of course, the U.S. government central bankers are going to try to pump up the market once again. They're going to try to push it with Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, with their 3% down, and if you have a heartbeat, you can get a mortgages. And we can see right now that the housing market is really not doing well. Even with gas prices low and consumer confidence at the highest reported level in 7 years, there was a lot to be cheery about heading into the holiday home buying season. However, positive consumer sentiment did not translate into more real estate transactions last month, as the number of homes sold plunged 21% in November versus October and was down 5% from this time last year. Fewer people bought homes last month despite interest rates being at their lowest levels of the year. Interest rates are coming down, sales are falling. This tells you something is wrong. People don't have the funds. We understand that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, They are now getting ready to unveil their mortgage programs with down payments as low as 3%, especially with those builders, the construction builders. A lot of them will take up the slack and even cover the 3% down. So a lot of these people will be going into new homes with 0% down. And if you have a heartbeat, you can get a mortgage. I don't know how this is going to turn out, but I don't think it's going to turn out as well as they think it's going to be. We might see a slight bump, just like last year when we were heading into the summer. We saw a slight bump and then it started to decrease right after that, and here we are today. But I think things are going to get a lot worse because the job market is not doing well. People are going to enter these homes with no down payment, with nothing invested in them, and when everything starts to fall apart, they're just going to leave them, just like they did back in 2007, 2008, when everything came crashing down. People just left their homes because they had nothing invested in them. Now, the Fed is reporting that they had just experienced a 42-ton withdrawal. This is the single largest outflow of gold held at the New York Fed in over a decade, going back all the way to 2001. In November, some 47.1 tons of gold were withdrawn from the New York Fed, bringing the Fed's total earmark gold to just 6,029 tons. This is the biggest single monthly outflow going back to the turn of this century. And we can see gold is just flowing out of the Fed right now. I wonder where it is going. Now, yesterday I reported that John Kerry was meeting with King Abdullah in Saudi Arabia, and it seemed like the United States and Saudi Arabia came together with this scheme to lower oil prices. And of course, everyone's saying, oh, it's a conspiracy, it's not true. How could you say that? Well, if you really look at the situation and you look at what's going on, you see that they've placed sanctions on Russia. They're pushing a lot of pressure on Russia right now. They're provoking Russia, and they're continually doing this. And even Obama, he has insinuated that the United States was behind the sharp fall in oil prices, which was orchestrated to negatively affect Russia. In the NPR interview, Obama suggested that the U.S. administration was behind the sharp decline in oil prices, which was intended to hit Russia's vulnerability. And on Monday, the U.S. president told NPR broadcasters that when the country and its allies were implementing sanctions against Russia, they aimed to make its economy sufficiently vulnerable. Obama added that volatility in oil prices could be expected, if not this year, then the year after, but stressed this was inevitable and Russia would have no way to overcome this, and it would be very difficult to overcome. And he's saying this would help reduce and destroy the economy of Russia. So he's kind of leading in there saying that, yes, the United States was behind this. We were the ones who did this. And when we look at the whole situation and we take a look at what Saudi Arabia is doing, they're already predicting with their budget next year that oil will be going back up. They didn't price their budget in $60 a barrel, $40 a barrel, $20 a barrel. They priced it in $75 per barrel. This tells us that they're planning on raising the price of oil once again, and I think once we hit the spring of 2015, moving into the summer, I think the oil prices are going to go right back up to where they were and maybe even worse, and we're going to see that slow creep to more expensive gas because the holiday season is over. They're trying to push Russia's economy down in any way they possibly can to help with the sanctions that they placed on Russia. And once this occurs, I don't think they're getting what they thought they were going to get, and then they're just going to put the oil prices back to where they were, and all of this is going to be look back on and say, okay, they did this because of the holiday season. They did this to hit at Russia, and none of this worked whatsoever, and things are going to go back to exactly what we've had in the past, very high gas prices, which will then increase the cost of food once again. Now, as I've been talking about, the United States government, the central bankers, they are continually trying to brainwash our children in school. This is why they came up with Common Core. This is why they wanted all the states involved in Common Core, and they wanted education to be nationalized. Now, there are some signs that the U.S. public schools are rapidly being turned into indoctrination centers. All 50 U.S. states are now constructing federally mandated databases that will track the behavior and performance of all public school students in America throughout the entire school careers. The Obama administration wants to use the information that is gathered for a wide array of purposes. The administration wants this data to include much more than name, address, and test scores. According to the National Data Collection Model, the government would like to collect information on healthcare history, family income, family voting status, and create social profiles on everyone, who you are involved with, what groups you're associated with, and this way we can keep track of every single person, especially the student, as they grow up. Does your family have weapons? How do you feel about the government? And you can see this is exactly what is going on. All over America, students are being taught that the First Amendment does not apply in public schools. Expressions of free speech in schools are often cracked down upon very hard. We also understand that a lot of the Common Core textbooks, they have rewritten the rights, and they're trying to convince the students that they are privileges and the government can take them away at any time. In some U.S. schools, RFID chips are now being used to monitor the attendance and movements of children while they're at school, and we know for a fact that these RFID chips will be going into every person's license, because these will be all under the governance of DHS, which is the Real ID. I think they changed it to a different name, but all states need to come in compliance. This Real ID will then be shot up to a federally owned database. It will include your fingerprint, iris scan, all the information about you, and in each one of these licenses there will be an RFID chip, and on the back there will also be a barcode, just in case the RFID chip fails. Our children are being programmed to accept the fact that they will be watched and monitored constantly. For example, the U.S. Department of Agriculture is spending large amounts of money to install surveillance cameras in the cafeterias of public schools all across the nation so that government control freaks can closely monitor what our children are eating and doing, and we see cameras going up every single place. If you can believe it, certified TSA officials was recently brought in to oversee student searches at the Santa Fe High School prom. According to a blogger, Alexander Higgins, students in kindergarten and the first grade in the state of New Jersey are now required by law to participate in monthly anti-terrorism drills. This is to get everyone ready and convinced that terrorism is coming to the United States and it's coming from the outside. In some U.S. schools, armed cops accompanied by police dogs actually conduct surprise raids with their guns drawn. This is to get everyone used to this. The U.S. government is now encouraging children to spy on their parents as part of their war on terror. If a school official hears that a parent has said the wrong thing at home, the parent could potentially get labeled as a potential terrorist. Increasingly, authorities are using pre-crime technology on our children in order to identify potential problem individuals. For example, the Florida State Department of Juvenile Justice has announced that it will begin using analysis software to predict crime by young delinquents and will place potential offenders in specific prevention and education programs. And this is before they even have done anything. And again, this goes back to the Minority Report, where they're trying to predict of who will be a threat to the government's authority. And this is what they're using it for. This is what they're trying to do. And you can see it starts from an early age, where they're trying to convince all the people that yes, their rights are really privileges. You have to speak in a caged area. You don't have the ability to think on your own. You will think the way we want you to think, and you will be a good worker when you grow up, and we will track you. We will know where you are. We will know where you're going, who you're talking to, what your shopping habits are. You will have no privacy whatsoever, and this is what the government and the central bankers are trying to do. Now, it seems that there is an NAC leak which was revealed to let everyone know that the National Security Agency boasts the ability to compromise computer protocols meant to encrypt private internet data. Leaked documents have revealed, but the NSA has fallen short of totally winning its war against crypto. This is why they need a backdoor into everything, because they can't break all the encryption. They need to know the method, then they can figure out the key. But if you create your own encryption, they can't figure it out. This is why they don't want anyone to have encryption on their phone that they don't know about, because they can't listen in on calls, they can't understand what you're doing. And a lot of people have been creating their own encryption, and a lot of the encryption methods out there, they have been certified by the NSA, so they know the method, they know how to figure out the key. And we can see right now that the classified NSA files taken by former contractor Edward Snowden and published for the first time by Der Spiegel on Sunday reveal that while the United States intelligence agency is indeed an adept at cracking encryption, its efforts are no match when it comes to some of the more popular protocols used to keep communications private. Properly implemented strong crypto systems are one of the few things that you can rely on, Snowden said. And we can see right now that all this about them listening to the terrorists, listening to chatter, again, if the NSA was going to listen to any one of these things, the terrorists would not do it over a public line. They would probably use notes, they would probably have different codes, and they wouldn't be doing it over the internet. The only reason the NSA needs backdoors into Google, Yahoo, Microsoft, Apple is to spy on the American people, to spy on government officials, to spy on judges, to use it to blackmail people, to create social profiles. This is why they have been doing this. This is why it hasn't stopped. This is why it hasn't been dismantled. They're going to continue to do this. They are not going to stop because they need to know what everyone is doing, and this is why they're continually doing this over and over again, even though our government officials have been telling us, no, we're gonna reel this in, we're not gonna spy on the people anymore. And guess what? They're actually expanding it at this point in time. Now it looks like the Air Asia flight, they have been finding bodies from the sea. They've been pulling them in, and they're finding the bodies off the coast of Borneo. The search has included about 30 ships and 21 aircraft from the South Korea, Singapore, Malaysia, Australia, and Indonesia countries. The warship Bung Tomo has retrieved about 40 bodies, and the number is growing. Indonesia is inviting the AirAsia engineers to confirm found objects. Indonesia says rough seas are hampering their recovery process. There's a lot of bad weather out there, and they're having a very rough time. Indonesia requesting additional to-dive teams from Navy to look at the bottom to find more of these objects, and it seems like something went terribly, terribly wrong with this flight, and they're looking for the black boxes right now to see exactly what has happened. Now, Edward Snowden has revealed additional documents to show that NATO's kill list for Afghanistan operations included not just senior Taliban leaders, but those suspected of being low and mid-level operative, as well as drug traffickers, women, children, or anyone else in the vicinity. Some of the secret documents, which are from 2009 to 2011, are from the trove released by Edward Snowden. The documents show that the deadly missions were not just viewed as a last resort to prevent attacks, but were in fact part of everyday life in the guerrilla war in Afghanistan. NATO troops would start with cleansing phase, killing insurgents. Risks of civilian casualties from strikes against those on the list were weighed, but seemed to be often accepted, and civilian only referred to women, children, and elderly. The rule of thumb was that when there was an estimated collateral damage, up to 10 people would be okay to murder. So basically what they're saying, if there was a building and they believe insurgents were on the 3rd floor and a family was living on the 1st floor, they would hit that building, and if they died, those people on the 1st floor that had nothing to do with the people on the 3rd floor, it would be okay. Now take this here into the United States. If there was an apartment building, let's say in New York, and there was a terrorist or a criminal on the 3rd floor of an apartment building and a family living in the 1st floor, would this be okay? No, it wouldn't. This is unacceptable. This is murder. Period. That's what this is. And this is showing us that they didn't care about what was going on there. They didn't care about the people there. And if they died, so be it. And we can see it that this is also in Yemen, Libya, Lebanon, Iraq, Syria because they've been bombing, they've been using drones, and if there are civilians, so be it, they might have to die. Now, the U.S. has been in Afghanistan, and since they've been in Afghanistan, they were there to pretty much combat the opium poppy cultivation, but what has happened is the opposite. The poppy cultivation expanded as the U.S. was in Afghanistan. Why? Because they were guarding it. They were using it for sales for their covert operations, selling it as opium across the ocean. And we can see right now, before the United States government came into Afghanistan, they were better off. Poppy production was way down, pretty much almost non-existent. It was very low, and as the government came in, it expanded and got bigger and bigger, and they had a major problem. And of course, as we know, to get in Afghanistan was a complete lie. They used 9/11 to say bin Laden was in Afghanistan in these caves. They showed us pictures of his living quarters where he had a TV, a fridge. They knew everything about his living quarters except where he was. And they went in there, they bombed, they garrisoned the country. They stayed in this country for years and years and years, and still they are never leaving. Because why? China, Russia are there. They have a huge amount of copper deposits, lithium deposits, and oil, and it's in a strategic location, so they will never be leaving Afghanistan. Now, out in Ukraine, we see that their economy basically is imploding. So, what do we know? Let's see. The United States central bankers decided to have a coup d'etat and remove the elected government of Ukraine, replace it with their people, bankers, people from the United States, put into place into this country. They thought they were going to take the entire country, have a port in the Black Sea, keep Ukraine in the strategic location, commandeer all the gas flow that goes throughout Europe, and guess what? It didn't happen. Russia stepped in. The people in Crimea voted their section away, so they didn't get the port in the Black Sea. The southeastern people said, you know what, we don't want to be part of this puppet government, and they pretty much had a referendum, and ever since they've been at war because Kiev has been trying to get that part of the country back because that's where all the production is. The central bankers right now pretty much destroyed the economy of Ukraine. Right now, the GDP shrank by 7.5%, and inflation reached 21% by November. The country basically has a 100% devaluation in its currency. It is pretty much worth nothing. The head of Ukraine right now is saying that the full-scale Ukraine is in a full-scale financial crisis. So are the people better off? Let's see. They have electricity blackouts. They can't heat their homes. Their currency is worth nothing. People can't find jobs. They are constantly in war. How is their country any better? Who's it better for? That's right, the central bankers. That's who is profiting from all of this. They stole their goal. They bought out their pipeline. They put their relatives, their friends on the boards to control the situation. So basically, they pretty much commandeered the entire country, and they want the rest of it, and this is what we're going to see as time goes on. They will have some type of major offensive. Something will go down, and they will go after the southeastern section and Crimea eventually. Now, as we know, the United States government, the central bankers, have been putting the screws to Russia. They've been using sanctions. They've been using the decrease in oil prices to crush the economy, and they're going to do another thing, and we're seeing it already. There are protests out there, and they're trying to do the same thing they're doing in China, what they've done in the Middle East and in Ukraine. They want the people to rise up and to remove the government. They want a regime change. They want to put in a puppet government. This is why we saw the umbrella protests in China, but the Chinese quashed that. We see it happening now in Russia. About 1,500 people gathered in Moscow Square for an unsanctioned rally. But what's very interesting about this, if you see the videotape, they're all chanting in English. And the chants are not no Putin, no war. If you are in a country like Russia or China or in the Middle East, why would people chant in English? It makes no sense. The only reason you do this is because they were brought in there, they were set up to try to rally the people together, and this is for the American people to show this is exactly what they're chanting. Because if they chanted in Russia, most of the people here, almost all, would not know what they're talking about, and they wouldn't care. But if it was in English, they could see, no Putin, no war, people are rising up, and this is how you can tell something has been set up. This is how you can tell it was done on purpose, and they're trying to maneuver now people in Russia to overthrow Putin. This is their game. This is what they're planning, because we have to remember the BRICS go live in 2015. They're hoping with crushing the economy of Russia that people will rise up and join this. And it isn't a true grassroots protest, because you would see thousands upon thousands of people. All you're seeing is 1,500, 1,000 people in this area. The same thing happened in China. You only saw a small portion of the people, and they're the ones who are trying to get everyone involved in this. And if it's truly a grassroots rising up, you would see millions upon millions of people out there pushing the agenda. But you don't see this whatsoever. And again, the indicator that this is set up by the United States is that they're chanting in English. Now, in my past reports, we talked about how all the countries are going to be fighting for the Arctic. We understand in the Arctic there's a huge amount of gas and oil in this region. It is also a strategic region. We understand Canada, the United States, and Russia are all moving into this area. Russia's now, their northern fleet will become the backbone of its new Arctic command, with its area of engagement including the high latitude areas of the Arctic Ocean and the North Pole. The Arctic Zone Force grouping is being created right now. It needs a commander and leading branch of the armed forces. The Arctic is an ocean area, so the Navy has taken the lead. A unit of advanced Pantsir S-1 air defense systems will be deployed to one of the refurbished airfields in the Arctic. So you can see Russia is maneuvering, staking out its claim there. The United States is doing the same. Canada is doing the same. And we can see right now war will be fought in the Arctic as well as in many other areas. Now, in Eastern Europe, we understand the United States, NATO, they've been bringing in military assets into this region. They've been storing them in caves. They've been going on training missions, and they've been enhancing the missile shield. Right now, the United States plans by the end of next year to station around 150 tanks and armored vehicles in Europe for use by U.S. forces. Some of the tanks and vehicles, enough to equip an armored brigade, could be pre-positioned in Poland, Romania, and the Baltic states. And we already know there are already tanks there for training, and guess what? They will stay there. They will not be removed. This has happened many, many times before. Back in August of 2013, when they were planning on going into Syria and they had the false flag event, they had a training mission in Jordan. They brought military assets and soldiers. They left them there, and then all of a sudden there was a false flag event. The same thing happened once again right before the United States government and the coalition decided to go into Iraq and Syria. They had a training mission in Georgia. There were thousands of soldiers there, military assets, and all of a sudden the United States and the coalition had to go into both of these countries to fight off the Islamic State. It's always pre-positioned and ready to go. And right now, what do we see? We see all the military assets being brought down into Kuwait, brought around Iraq, because they're ready for a major offensive, which will eventually go into Iraq and then into Syria, because their main goal is to get Assad. It has never changed. It has always been the same. Now, the United States on Tuesday, even though they're in talks with the P5+1 with Iran, they decided to impose sanctions on 9 new targets, saying the entities and people targeted had supported Iran's efforts to avoid sanctions and backed the government's human rights abuses, including censorship. They do the same thing here. They torture people and they censor the media. Very interesting. The newly named targets include 5 people and 1 entity for their role in helping the Iranian government buy or acquire U.S. currency, according to the department. So here they're placing sanctions on people in Iran. At the same time, they're trying to have meetings and talk about peace and how Iran and the United States can come closer together. I don't know how this is going to work, but when you place sanctions on the country that you're talking about peace, it rarely works out. Now, we understand that Somalia was one of the countries that was on the list to go after, and it seems like the U.S. military has conducted an airstrike targeting a senior al-Shabaab leader in Somalia. Again, they're bringing the forces into this area, trying to keep these countries, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Lebanon, Yemen, these are all the countries where the people are rising up and they're having a tough time keeping the puppet governments in power. They're all being forced out. They're losing control, and this is why we're seeing the ramp up of strikes in these countries. Some of the other countries they can't even get into, so they're going to use the Islamic State to say, wherever the Islamic State is, that's where we need to go, and we can see that is definitely building up. Libya is completely unstable right now. They're having disruptions in oil production right now. Again, once the people in Libya take over the ports, the fields, and they start selling the oil, not using the dollar, this is when the U.S. government central bankers will make their move. Remember, when the people took an oil tanker, loaded up with oil, tried to sell it to the highest bidder using other currencies beside the U.S. dollar, the Navy SEALs were on top of that tanker, lickety split. They brought it right back. They would not allow this to happen, and we're going to see the same thing happen once again. Now, we understand the goal in Syria is to remove Assad. Assad right now is with Russia talking to the opposition, one of the opposition groups, about peace. And the United States government, the central bankers, are using propaganda to say, the reason why Syria is out there talking peace is because their military is deserting them. They're losing their people. The people are not with Assad right now. And they're going to start drafting people into the armed forces because they don't have enough soldiers. They're using anything they possibly can to convince the people of how the people don't support Assad. But again, we saw the elections back in July of 2014. Everyone came out, they voted for Assad. He was put back into being the president, and his forces are loyal to him. And again, they're doing everything they possibly can to remove Assad. This has been their goal from the beginning. Nothing has changed. Now, we understand with this Sony cyber attack, the United States was right out there, FBI, Obama administration saying, yes, North Korea, they were the hackers. And they came out very fast in saying that they were the ones. Almost like MH17, when it was shot down, they came out right in the beginning, it was Russia. And of course, we know it wasn't. Now, what they're saying, because a lot of cybersecurity firms are out there saying, you know what, we looked into this, and North Korea had nothing to do with this whatsoever. So, the FBI, the Obama administration, is trying to spin this right now, because they know they lied. The U.S. investigators believe that North Korea might have hired the hackers from outside the country to help with the last month's massive cyber attack against Sony. North Korea, they might lack the capability to conduct some elements of the sophisticated attacks against Sony, so they might have put an ad in, like Craigslist or something, and they might have hired outside people to help with this. Now they're backtracking right now because they know they've been caught. They realize that it's not going their way. There's a lot of firms out there who are saying, you know something? This had nothing to do with North Korea right now. What they are saying, and we've mentioned this before, that the hacks were by a laid-off Sony staffer who was upset about what has been happening with Sony. And they knew exactly where to go and look for the files. They knew exactly what they were doing. And the statements that were said didn't seem like they were coming from North Korea. It sounded like they were coming from some type of employee that was disgruntled. And we're seeing that A lot of the cyber intelligence companies like Norse, which I mentioned before, have said their own investigation into the data of the Sony attack doesn't point to North Korea. Instead, it indicates some combination of disgruntled employee and hackers for privacy groups as the fault. Many other companies are out there, Cloudflare and many others are now stepping up saying, you know something, the FBI is completely wrong. And bottom line, the hacker was a disgruntled employee, and the leaked email situation was promptly used by the studio execs to pretty much bring in the profits for this picture. This picture is a dud. Nobody was going to go out and see it. They knew this, so they wanted to try to gin something up. The FBI saw an opportunity. The Obama administration saw an opportunity. They jumped on it, and guess what? They attacked a country with a cyber attack. They brought their internet to its knees without any evidence. Basically, this is an act of war. And now the FBI, the Obama administration, they're trying to backpedal on this whole situation. They're saying they're standing firm with their knowledge that, yes, North Korea did it, but guess what? It's going to fall apart. It's going to disappear from the news media, and we'll never hear from it again. We will not the Obama administration, the FBI will most likely never come out and say we were wrong. This was a false flag event. This was to provoke North Korea, to demonize North Korea, and it did exactly that. Now the American people are thinking, yes, North Korea is very dangerous. Yes, they are backed up maybe by Russia, because at one point it was pointing towards Russia. So right now we have China cyber espionaging. We have Russia, where they're saying they've cyber attacked the power grid, where they have malware sitting there waiting to bring it down. We have North Korea, where it's in the minds of the people that, yes, they could be cyber attacking the United States. We have the Islamic State that could access the malware that's on the financial institutions and the power grid. And we have the Syrian Electronic Army, which is completely made up by the U.S. government to convince us that, yes, eventually they will attack. And I can't forget about Iran. Iran, they've been making a lot of statements about how they've been getting more advanced, how they've been inserting malware and attacking different sectors here in the United States. So they're bringing all the players together. They're trying to convince everyone these are the countries, these are the groups that will be involved when the power grid comes down, when the financial institutions are brought to their knees, and when the economy is collapsed. But we know better. We understand that this is happening, and there will be physical attacks because of the lone wolf groups, which we've been talking about for a long time. It is now coming to a head. They are getting ready because the economy in Europe, in the United States, is completely falling apart. It is separating from the manipulated numbers to the real economic indicators. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.